The council wastes time. Supreme Marshal Vraxis leaned forward, his rigid exoskeleton creaking under the weight of his decorated warplate. His crimson battle sigil pulsed faintly under the artificial lighting, his clawed hand curling into a fist against the polished obsidian surface of the speaker's dais. We have tolerated Earth's defiance long enough. They mock our authority. They disregard our decrees. And yet we sit here, debating. His sharp mandibles clicked once in disgust. The Zyphran Dominion will end this now. A murmur rippled through the 100 assembled delegations, though none spoke against him, not openly. The Zyphran Empire had earned its reputation through the systematic dismantling of resistant civilizations, their campaigns spanning entire sectors. When they moved, planets fell. Their war machine, honed through generations of conquest, had crushed empires older and stronger than Earth's fledgling world. Yet one voice cut through the chamber like a serrated blade. "And what," said Ralvek, his tone neither raised nor hurried, "makes you so certain this will be like your other wars?" The Ultherian delegate's slitted pupils remained fixed on Vraxis, his scarred hands resting lightly on the table before him. Because they have no empire? Because they only have one planet? Have you asked yourself why they are not afraid? Silence. Not the silence of agreement, but the kind that meant the question had burrowed into minds unwilling to acknowledge it. Vraxis exhaled sharply, expelling a sharp burst of heated breath. "Enough with your paranoia, Ralvik. We are strategists. We do not base war on fear, but on fact. And the fact is, Earth is nothing more than a scattered, quarrelsome species, barely unified under a single banner. Their fleets are laughable, their defenses non-existent." Ralvek's expression remained unreadable, but there was something in his gaze, something that made even the more seasoned war tacticians shift uneasily in their seats. "If that were true," Ralvek murmured, "then explain the anomalies." A data stream flickered to life above the council chamber. A series of cold, factual reports materialized, rotating in the air like silent accusations. Lost probes, missing agents, data corruption beyond explanation, skirmishes where superior forces suffered inexplicable losses. The most damning footage played last, a Zyphran scout ship, sleek and battle-ready, approaching Earth's orbit. Its transmission cut mid-sentence. The vessel never returned. No wreckage, no distress signals, just gone. A sharp voice broke through the air. "Malfunction," one of Vraxis's advisors snapped. "Or sabotage." "Or," Ralvek interjected, his voice as steady as before, "something else." Vraxis clenched his jaw. "You waste our time with superstition." "I warn you with logic," Ralvek countered smoothly. "There is no recorded proof of Earth's technological superiority, and yet every intelligence report has been compromised. Every attempt at subjugation has failed. You claim they are weak, yet they remain unconquered. If they were truly insignificant, then why is their world still free?" The silence this time stretched longer. Vraxis broke it with a sharp, dismissive wave of his talons. "Enough of this cowardice. The Dominion does not hesitate before insects. We eradicate them. We do not cower from shadows." He turned toward the central dais, where the council leader, an ancient, many-limbed being of the Zarn Collective, sat impassively. "Let us put this to a vote. Shall the invasion commence?" The display shifted. The results were immediate. Authorization granted, 87%. Ralvek exhaled through his nose, his hands clasped together as though he had already seen the outcome. He didn't argue, didn't press further, but the way his fingers curled against the table, knuckles tightening, suggested that he knew something they did not. Deep within the war nexus of the Zyphran Dominion, the fleet moved. Colossal warships, each a city in its own right, stirred from their docking bays, their armored hulls gleaming under the artificial lighting of the orbital shipyards. Fighters swarm like mechanical predators, weaving between towering carriers as final preparations commenced. Battle algorithms processed planetary suppression tactics, planetary targeting systems locked onto predetermined sites. Inside the flagship Dominion's Wrath, Supreme Marshal Vraxis observed the deployment with a confident satisfaction. "Begin final tactical synchronization," he ordered. A vast laser plasma display flickered to life before him, highlighting Earth's geography. Population centers mapped, resource zones marked, military installations scanned. "Pathetic," murmured Tactical Officer Juvarn, standing at Vraxis's side. His chitin-plated fingers skimmed across the battle display. "They lack planetary defenses, no orbital gun platforms, no shield grids." He tapped a set of coordinates with a slow, deliberate motion. "Not even a planetary evacuation. They are not prepared for war." "They are too unprepared," said Second Strategist Vokesh, his voice softer, more analytical. "This does not align with normal species behavior. Even primitives attempt resistance." Vraxis didn't look away from the map. "They are overconfident. The first strike will shatter that illusion." He gestured toward the navigation officer. "Initiate planetary warp. Target geosynchronous orbit over their capital regions." Engines ignited. Power surged through the fleet as the Zephyrin armada leaped into the unknown. From the distant station where the Eltherian Compact maintained its diplomatic stronghold, Ralvik stood before a reinforced viewport, watching the fleet disappear into the void. He had fought wars, had studied the unraveling of civilizations, the collapse of species who thought themselves invincible, and something about Earth did not align with anything he had ever known. He had no proof, no evidence that would sway minds already set on conquest. But deep in his gut, he knew. This invasion would not go as the Dominion expected. He turned away from the viewport, the stars reflected in his golden eyes. Perhaps it was not humanity that was in danger. Perhaps it was the Zephyrin Empire that had just sealed its fate. "Planetfall in 3 minutes. No resistance detected." The tactical officer's report should have been reassuring. Instead, a weight settled deep in Vrax's gut. He stood rigid, claws tapping once against the command dais, as Dominion's Wrath emerged from the warp corridor, the fleet appearing over Earth in a formation perfected over centuries of planetary suppression. Thousands of warships fanned out, their shadowed silhouettes blotting out the view of the blue-green sphere below. It should have been a moment of dominance, the prelude to annihilation, and yet something was off. No planetary defense grids powered up, no scrambling fighter squadrons, no distress signals, not a single reaction from the surface. The bridge was eerily silent, save for the quiet clicks of navigation recalibrating. Officers exchanged uncertain glances. It was unnatural. Even species with inferior technology had at least attempted resistance before the first strike. Fear was instinctual. Yet Earth remained still. Vraxis exhaled, forcing the tension from his shoulders. "They do not react because they are powerless. Fire the opening salvo." Across the fleet, energy capacitors surged to full charge. Kinetic bombardment platforms locked onto predetermined target zones. Military installations, industrial hubs, government centers. Initiate orbital cleansing. Tactical screens flared with launch confirmations. Tens of thousands of projectiles descended, guided by targeting arrays too advanced for error. Atmospheric entry was achieved in seconds, and then everything unraveled. Red indicators flashed across the command display. Impact confirmations disappeared mid-report. Some projectiles never struck ground. Others veered wildly off course as if repelled by an unseen force. Scans provided no logical explanation. "Sir," an officer's voice held a strain of something Vraxis did not appreciate. "The bombardment pattern is failing. Some locations registered detonation, but others show nothing." He turned sharply. "Nothing?" Crater readings are inconsistent. Some regions appear untouched, others show damage, but analysis suggests a mismatch between kinetic force and impact depth. That was impossible. Kinetic strikes adhered to predictable physics: mass, velocity, target material. There was no room for variance. Vraxis's claws curled tighter. Deploy atmospheric drones. I want visual confirmation. Launch bays disengaged. Hundreds of reconnaissance units streaked toward the planet, their feeds transmitting directly to the bridge. The first images came through. Military bases remained intact. Cities stood unscathed. Yet in uninhabited locations, deep deserts, frozen tundras, impact craters marred the land. The bombardment had hit, but not where it was meant to, as if something had decided where the destruction was allowed to happen. A cold ripple passed through him, but he crushed it down. Switch to plasma rounds. Let's see them deflect raw energy. Orders were relayed, shipboard cannons recalibrating. Charged plasma lances discharged in coordinated waves. Entire atmospheric layers shimmered under the thermal spike. Every recorded civilization burned under this fire. And yet, the same phenomenon occurred. Some blasts vanished mid-air. Others bent off course at impossible angles. And then the first fleet anomaly hit. A violent tremor rattled the command deck. Officers braced against control stations, unreadable data spilling across displays. Report! One of the bridge technicians struggled to stabilize readings. Unexpected energy fluctuations. Gravitational anomalies detected within fleet positioning. That made no sense. Orbital stabilization thrusters adjusted for minor planetary gravity shifts. Gravitational anomalies did not simply manifest. Another tremor rippled through the ship. The lights flickered. Not from weapons fire, not from system failure, as if something was interfering with fundamental power distribution. Vraxis's gaze narrowed. This was not normal warfare. Initiate full diagnostics. I want... A choked gasp cut through the bridge chatter. One of the secondary officers staggered back from his console, his breathing uneven. He gripped the edges of the control station, mandibles flexing involuntarily. "The air," he gasped. "Something's wrong." Several crew members swayed where they stood. Others, though unaffected, noticed the change. Breathing felt heavier, movement subtly sluggish. It clicked. Oxygen variation, a bioengineered atmospheric shift. Something was altering the fleet's environmental stability. Vraxis snarled a command, overriding auto-ventilation protocols. Stabilize oxygen ratios. Adjust filtration manually if needed. The ship's systems responded instantly. The tremors subsided. The momentary disorientation among the crew ceased. But the damage had been done. An enemy had just manipulated their physiology mid-battle. His patience snapped. Deploy ground forces immediately. Secure the cities, neutralize resistance, and establish planetary control. Troop carriers disengaged from the fleet. On the surface, the real nightmare began. The first battalions landed near designated strongholds, military complexes, urban zones, but as they advanced, something was wrong. The terrain shifted. Scans had shown predictable city layouts, avenues, structural grids, industrial zones. Now formations led into corridors that weren't supposed to exist. Some roads ended abruptly in featureless walls where highways should have been. Landmarks identified during surveillance missions had vanished entirely. Tactical coordination collapsed in minutes. No two squads reported the same geography. Then came the first disappearances. Unit 14. Alpha ceased transmission. No distress calls. No hostile engagements. Just silence. 2 additional squads went dark in the next 10 minutes. "Sir," a field commander's transmission came through, voice tight. "The drones," a burst of static, then clarity, "are dropping from the sky. Every single one." Vraxis stiffened. A chill settled into the command deck. Zyphrin aerial reconnaissance units weren't conventional. Their AI was built to withstand cyber warfare, their systems impervious to standard signal disruption. And yet something had just overridden them. A sharp crackle interrupted his thoughts. A transmission, audio only, filtered through the fleet-wide channel. A voice, human. It carried no fear, no urgency, just calm amusement. Interesting tactics. Tell me, Supreme Marshal, are you enjoying the war so far? Every breath on the bridge stilled. Vraxis froze. How had they infiltrated the fleet's transmission network? Their encryption was impossible to break in real time. His talons curled against the control panel. Identify the source of that transmission. Now. The communications officer struggled with the controls. Tracing the signal, but sir, it's... He hesitated. Originating from inside our own command systems. Vraxis' blood ran cold. This wasn't a defensive battle. This wasn't resistance. They had never been the invaders. They were the ones being played. His grip tightened, eyes burning into the laser display, now glitching with indecipherable readings. Shut down all external access points. Purge any foreign signal input. Before the command could be executed, the ship's lights dimmed again. Weapon systems flickered offline. Fleet-wide reports came flooding in. Engines disengaged. Targeting arrays scrambled. And then, one final transmission. A single phrase. Calm. Inevitable. You've already lost. Fleet is on target. No deviations. The voice in Commander Doran Hale's earpiece was steady, clinical, void of unnecessary chatter. Just how he preferred it. His boots were magnet-locked to the floor of his drop pod, the interior lit only by the cold glow of heads-up displays feeding him real-time data from the battle overhead. Earth's 67th Fleet had arrived, and not a single Zyphrin sensor had detected them. He clenched his fists, feeling the low hum of the launch sequencer counting down. Outside, the warship's internal mechanisms whirred in controlled efficiency. No wasted movements, no unnecessary systems running. The Tarless forces below had no idea death was already falling toward them. Drop sequence in 5, the comlink cut through the stillness. Hale exhaled, gaze locked on the digital readout, displaying target coordinates. The landing zone was just behind the Zyphrin stronghold in Sector 9, an enemy-occupied industrial district meant to be impenetrable. The word meant carried a particular weight. The moment the countdown hit 0, the launch systems engaged. Hale's stomach lurched as the pod detached, accelerating toward the surface like a meteor stripped of fire. The reinforced exoframe absorbed the violent descent, but the forces were still bone-rattling. Every impact against the atmosphere another reminder of how fast they were coming down. Hundreds of pods followed in formation, streaking through the sky in coordinated intervals. On the surface, the Zyphrin ground forces had no warning, no sirens, no advance signals, just silhouettes descending at terminal velocity. Seconds before impact, Hale toggled the retro system. The air around his pod compressed violently, the kinetic dampeners bleeding off the final descent speed. Then, collision. The reinforced hatch blew outward before the dust settled and Hale was already moving. Boots on solid ground, weapon raised, eyes scanning for first threats. The sector was in chaos. Tarless command posts, once a model of discipline, were breaking down in real time. Hunter-killer drones had already neutralized primary anti-air positions, their autonomous targeting systems feeding direct tactical overlays into every soldier's neural uplink. The enemy wasn't reacting. They were collapsing.
Hale advanced, pushing forward through rubble-strewn streets as his team fanned out, clearing passageways with a precision that made the Zyphrin countermeasures look like a child's imitation of war. Enemy squads ahead came a clipped report over his comms. Hale signaled acknowledgement and rounded the corner, only to find Zyphrin troops scrambling for cover, their command structure obliterated. One alien soldier, mandibles twitching in shock, fumbled to raise his rifle. Hale didn't give him the chance. A single controlled burst from his weapon punched through the enemy's chest plate, sending the body crumpling backward. The other Exiphron made the mistake of turning to flee. Hale's second shot caught him at the base of the skull. "Push forward," he ordered. "No survivors, no mercy." The walls of his prison had been carved from Exiphron battle alloy, designed to withstand siege weapons, escape attempts, and even controlled demolition. None of that mattered. Logan had already neutralized his guards, and now their own weapons were slung across his back. The sounds of war outside grew louder. Earth had arrived. A Exiphron officer lunged for an alarm panel, but Logan was already moving, his body an extension of instinct honed through years of training. He drove the butt of his stolen rifle into the officer's skull, feeling the crack of exoskeletal plates beneath the impact. The alien slumped forward, unconscious before his body hit the floor. Logan exhaled, adjusting his grip on the rifle as he stepped over the fallen figure. The hallway stretched ahead, sterile and unremarkable, but the layout had burned into his mind long before he'd been captured. He had spent weeks mapping this facility in his head, analyzing guard rotations, blind spots, hidden weapons caches, and now with the tarless war machine imploding outside, he had the perfect opportunity to dismantle them from within. On the war-ravaged bridge of Dominion's Wrath, Supreme Marshal Vraxis fought against the inevitable. Deploy all remaining ground units. Redirect orbital platforms to suppress incoming reinforcements. He barked, his mandibles clicking in controlled fury. The fleet was already crippled, his ground forces outmaneuvered, outgunned, outthought. Still, he refused to accept retreat. "Sir," an officer's voice was tight, struggling to hold composure. "Our command signals are not reaching deployed forces." A sharp static burst interrupted the report. Vraxis turned sharply. "Explain." "Electronic warfare units have compromised our transmission relays," the officer managed, his complexion darkening with realization. "We are completely..." The feed cut out. Vraxis felt it then. True, suffocating recognition of what had happened. They hadn't been fighting an invasion. They had been led into a terminal engagement. Earth had never been on the defensive. The Exiphron Dominion had never been the predator. And now the final blow was about to land. Vraxis turned to his weapons officer. "Fire every available ship-to-surface weapon. If we fall, we take them with us." The command was met with silence. The weapon control officer stood frozen. Not in defiance, but in resignation. Vraxis followed his gaze. The weapon interface was dark. A transmission cut through the silence. Calm, measured, human. "This is no longer your war to fight, Supreme Marshal." Vraxis did not turn. Did not react. His hands curled into fists of useless rage. And then the first orbital kinetic rod fell. No explosions. No shockwave of fire and debris. Just the cold, merciless impact of a weapon designed to shatter planetary defenses without warning. The war ended in silence. Not in flames. Not in surrender. In the simple, brutal reality that the Exiphron had never stood a chance. By the time the Galactic Council received its first distress signal, it was already too late. The Exiphron Dominion's greatest fleet was gone, their strongholds erased, their command structure non-existent, and Earth had barely even started fighting. Vraxis exhaled, a slow breath that felt like surrender. Then, for the first time in his entire life, he understood. This had never been a battle. This had been an execution. Vraxis struggled against the restraints, but resistance was meaningless. His limbs were bound in a suspension field, the energy dampening his strength, restricting movement to the shallow rise and fall of his chest. The warship's command deck, once the nerve center of Exiphron military dominance, was no longer his to control. A human stood before him, no grand uniform, no ostentatious insignia, just a man in dark fitted combat gear, arms crossed over his chest, as he studied the fallen warlord like an interesting specimen under glass. "We knew you'd come," the human finally spoke, his voice even almost bored, "and we knew exactly how you'd react." Vraxis clenched his mandibles, glaring through the dim lighting that now bathed his own bridge in unfamiliar tones. "Your species has no honor. You fight like vermin, striking from the shadows." The human tilted his head slightly. "You came to our world, you assumed victory before the first shot was fired. And you still believe this was a battle. He let out a quiet exhale, a slow shake of his head. No, Supreme Marshal. You weren't fighting for conquest. You were fighting for survival, and you never realized it. Vraxis stilled, the words sinking into his mind like barbed steel. The planetary defenses, he started, but the human cut him off with a slow, deliberate step forward. Didn't exist. Earth's true defense strategy across the command displays, now overtaken by human control. Entire segments of the X-Fran war machine blinked out of existence. There were no planetary shields. The human continued gesturing toward the readouts. No ground-to-orbit weapons strong enough to halt an invasion. You studied our world and saw weakness. That was the first lie we fed you. Vraxis's mind raced, clawing for explanations. Our scans showed exactly what we wanted you to see. The human's tone never wavered, never lifted in triumph or arrogance, just cold, dispassionate fact. Every piece of intelligence your empire gathered was false. The probes you lost, taken, dissected, reassembled, and sent back with modified data. Your infiltrators, allowed to survive just long enough to report carefully curated misinformation before they were erased. Every assumption you made was planted. A hollow weight settled in Vraxis' gut. You never adapted, the human continued, clasping his hands behind his back as he paced. You thought you were hunting prey, so you never asked the right question. A single command was input into the control panel. The display shifted, revealing tactical overlays of the battle that had never been a battle at all. Warships shut down before their first volleys. Troops sent into a manufactured maze of false geography. Entire battalions severed from their chain of command before they could even react. You should have asked why we let you find us. The fleet's capture across the wreckage of the X-Fran formation, the last remnants of their once mighty naval armada, hung motionless, not destroyed, but taken. Humanity's fleet had been there from the beginning, not hiding, not in hyperspace, just waiting, masked by sensor disruption fields, so advanced that not a single X-Fran system had detected them until it was too late. Their own warships had been outmaneuvered by an enemy that had never needed to move. Tarless dreadnoughts drifted without power. Assault carriers, their hulls intact, were already being boarded by small, methodical human strike teams. Vraxis's second-in-command, still standing behind him, shook with rage. You'll never be able to control our technology, our systems. The human tapped a command into the terminal. The bridge lights changed. The X-Fran interface adjusted itself, now displaying Earth's insignia, its entire operational control rewritten in seconds. Vraxis's breath caught. You were saying, the human murmured, barely glancing up. The coldest realization, the silence stretched, thick and unbearable, as the sheer weight of what had happened finally settled. Earth hadn't just defended itself. It had absorbed the X-Fran fleet, their warships, their technology, their entire military structure, without firing a single conventional round. The Dominion's wrath, once the flagship of X-Fran supremacy, now responded to human commands. The human finally turned back to face him, a subtle edge to his voice. Do you understand now? The war you thought you started, Vraxis said nothing. Good, the human continued. Because it never existed, your forces never stood a chance. And your leaders, they don't even know you lost. A single command was input into the system. Across the remaining X-Fran vessels, external communications were severed. No distress signals, no warnings, no chance to alert the greater Dominion of what had happened. The X-Fran war machine had disappeared. Erased, the human leaned in just slightly, his voice no longer even, but edged with something Vraxis had never heard before. Finality. You didn't lose a war. You ceased to exist. The display flickered one last time. The X-Fran Dominion's entire operational network, its fleet movements, its resource caches, its secured planetary holdings, now belonged to Earth, and the real war hadn't even started yet. The Dominion is gone. Vraxis didn't want to believe it. His empire had ruled unchallenged for centuries, its war machine unstoppable, yet now his ships drifted lifeless in the void, their weapons disabled, their communications cut. His own bridge, once a nerve center of destruction, was a tomb of silence. The human in front of him didn't gloat, didn't mock. That made it worse. You'll be forgotten, the man said, adjusting the cuffs of his combat uniform as if discussing routine maintenance. By the time your High Council realizes anything happened, the Dominion will be an empire of ghosts. Vraxus's mandibles twitched. You think the Council will stand by? They'll come for you. They won't, the human interrupted. Because they'll never know. A single motion, and the laser plasma display illuminated a network of captured Xfron data feeds, fleet movements, resource allocations, strategic intelligence, rewritten in real time. Earth hadn't just defeated the Dominion, it had assimilated it. Every distress signal was intercepted before it left the system. Every surviving officer was already being processed. The Dominion's fleets, now under human command, would continue sending routine reports to the High Council, their deception perfect. By the time your leaders suspect anything, they'll be wondering why their fleets don't answer their hails, the human said, and by then it won't matter. Vraxus's claws flexed against the restraint field. You don't understand what you've provoked. You still think this is about provocation. The human's gaze sharpened. We never wanted this war. You forced our hand. He leaned in, voice lowering. You're used to fighting species who beg for their survival. You expected fear, desperation. His fingers tapped against the control panel, almost absent-mindedly. But we don't play by your rules. We never did. Vraxus knew the weight of defeat, had seen enemies crushed beneath the Dominion's war engines, but never had he imagined his own people would be erased with such finality. A soft chime broke the stillness. The human glanced at the screen, nodded. It's done. Vraxus's throat tightened. What is? The human didn't answer immediately. He gestured toward the display where entire fleets had once been charted across the Dominion's controlled space. Now those positions were shifting. Earth's fleet was moving into place. You assumed we were protecting ourselves, the human murmured. That was your final mistake. A deep weight settled in Vraxus's gut. This was never about defense, the human said, his voice carrying the finality of an executioner's sentence. It was about replacing you. A cold realization crashed down. Humanity hadn't been fighting for survival. They had been securing their first conquest. Vraxus started, but words failed him. The human studied him for a long moment, as if deciding whether to explain further. Then with a casual motion, he keyed in the final command. Across the Xfron-controlled sectors, every ship, every stronghold, every operational command, was now under Earth's dominion. Vraxus was no longer supreme marshal. His empire was no longer his. You invaded Earth, the human said, turning for the exit, and in return, Earth took everything. The door sealed shut behind him, leaving Vraxus in the cold, dark silence of a throne that no longer existed.